Is that all you do? Clean rifles and hide behind racks?"
The sniper's voice was loud, mocking. A dozen elite soldiers laughed with him, but she didn't flinch. She just looked at the target 4,000 meters away and picked up his rifle. No adjustments, no words, just one breath, and then the impossible happened. The target exploded, and the entire firing line went silent because the woman they mocked just rewrote the rules of war. Let's check in. 1 if it's your first time, 2 if you've watched a few, 3 if you never miss. You're watching Veteranbiker, where real strength speaks without rank. Subscribe for more untold stories. Let's begin. The humid air of the Fort Carson Armory clung to Callista Rhodes like a second skin. A familiar embrace of solvent fumes, gun oil, and the cold, comforting weight of steel. Her hands, calloused and strong, moved with an almost surgical precision, disassembling a KAK-SR 25 like it was an extension of her own anatomy. Each pin, spring, and component found its rightful place on the clean, sterile cloth spread before her. To the casual observer, she was just Major Rhodes, the quiet, unassuming armorer, a fixture of the motor pool, often overlooked, sometimes even dismissed by the very elite marksmen whose weapons she meticulously maintained. They strode through the armory with an air of self-importance, their conversations loud, their laughter echoing, their minds miles away from the grease and grit that defined Callista's world. They saw the tools, not the craftsman, the rifles, not the woman who ensured their flawless function. But Callista saw them. She saw the slight tremor in the hand of a celebrated sniper after a particularly grueling deployment. The subtle flinch when a new recruit fumbled a reassembly, the quiet pride in the eyes of a veteran hitting a distant target during practice. She saw the minute details that others missed, because that was her gift, her burden, and her solitary world. Her gaze, often downcast, belied an acuity that could pinpoint a microscopic burr on a firing pin from across the room, or detect the faintest wobble in a scope mount with a single touch. She was a ghost in her own domain, a silent guardian of the machines of war, her presence as understated as the hum of the ventilation system. This particular Tuesday, however, carried a different current, a ripple of anticipation, a low thrumming of ego and challenge vibrated through the armory doors. Captain Ben Carter, a rising star in the Special Forces sniper community, swaggered in, his grin wide, his eyes alight with a competitive fire that often bordered on arrogance. Trailing him were his spotter, Sergeant First Class Miller, and a handful of other elite marksmen, their faces a mix of excitement and skepticism. Carter had the kind of natural confidence that seemed to repel doubt, a quality that served him well in the field, but often bled into an overt sense of superiority in the mundane world of base operations. He reveled in the spotlight, and today, it seemed, he intended to steal it all. "All right, Major Rhodes," Carter boomed, his voice cutting through the clatter of tools with an almost deliberate loudness. "Got a new toy for you to clean after I break it in." He gestured to the Barrett-Mrad. 338 Lapua Magnum he carried, its long barrel gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of cutting-edge precision. "Heard you're the best at keeping these beauties purring." Callista simply nodded, her gaze briefly meeting his before returning to the SR 25, her fingers deftly working a tiny screw into place. "They all purr if they're treated right, Captain." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, easily lost in the ambient sounds of the armory. It was a voice that rarely betrayed emotion, a calm, steady cadence that mirrored her meticulous work. Carter chuckled, a sound full of self-satisfaction and a hint of condescension. "Easy for you to say, Major, you just clean 'em. We're the ones making them sing at 1,500 meters, 2,000 even. We're the ones pushing the envelope, seeing how far we can truly reach." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, allowing the implied distinction between his role and hers to settle. "Heard a rumor, though," he continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially, though still loud enough for everyone present to catch every word. "Some crazy talk about a long-range shot. Hypothetical, of course. 4,000 meters. A sudden sharp hush fell over the armory. 4,000 meters. The number hung in the air, audacious, almost ludicrous in its sheer audacity. The current world record for a confirmed kill was just over 3,500 meters, an achievement of extraordinary skill and luck, accomplished under highly specific, near-perfect conditions. 4,000 meters was beyond the realm of practical engagement, a theoretical limit that pushed the very boundaries of ballistics, atmospheric physics and human capability to their absolute breaking point. It was a sniper's fantasy, a dare whispered in the dark corners of firing ranges, typically only entertained after several rounds of drinks and a healthy dose of hubris. Sergeant First Class Miller, Carter's spotter, usually more reserved and pragmatic, spoke up, a note of genuine awe and skepticism in his voice. 4 kilometers? Captain, that's a bit beyond a new toy test drive. That's science fiction territory. Carter winked, dismissing Miller's concern with a theatrical flourish. Just a friendly wager, Miller, a challenge for the best of the best, to see who can even reach the target, let alone hit it. Bragging rights for a lifetime. Imagine the stories, the legend that would precede you. His eyes swept over the room, settling for a moment on Callista, a flicker of dismissive amusement in their depths. The corners of his mouth twitched, barely suppressing a smirk. Unless, of course, our resident rifle whisperer wants a crack at it. Might know how to make 'em sing that far, eh, Major? After all, you spend more time with them than we do. The words were cloaked in a thinly veiled mockery, a playful but condescending invitation to a game she wasn't supposed to play. It was a jab designed to underscore her perceived place as an auxiliary, not a participant in their elite world. The other snipers exchanged glances, some stifling chuckles, others looking distinctly uncomfortable, recognizing the deliberate slight. They knew Callista was exemplary at her job, but this was their domain, a sacred brotherhood of long-range precision, honed by countless hours of training and live fire deployments. A quiet armorer, a woman whose hands were more familiar with brushes and oils than with wind calls and trajectory calculations, had no business at their table challenging their prowess. Callista paused, her hand hovering over the SR-25's barrel, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor running through her fingers. She didn't look up immediately, but a subtle shift in her posture, a barely perceptible tightening of her jaw, indicated she had registered the insult, absorbed the sting of their derision. Her silence was often mistaken for meekness, her soft-spoken nature for a lack of backbone. They saw a woman who fixed guns. They failed utterly to see the force that had once wielded them, a force tempered in fire and forgotten by an official history. "The target," Callista finally said, her voice still quiet, but with an unexpected thread of steel woven within its soft fabric. The ambient noise of the armory seemed to recede, as if her voice, though not loud, possessed an unusual clarity. "What is it?" Carter laughed, a boisterous, dismissive sound that filled the sudden void of silence. "Oh, just a standard-issue silhouette, Major. Nothing fancy, unless you need something bigger, like a barn door? Or perhaps we can set up a target with flashing lights and a siren to help you out." His companions, emboldened by his lead, snickered openly, a wave of shallow amusement rippling through their ranks. Callista slowly placed the SR-25 down on the clean cloth. Her gaze finally lifted, meeting Carter's directly. Her eyes, often veiled by a distant thoughtfulness, were now startlingly clear, a deep, unsettling blue that seemed to bore into him, stripping away his bravado. They held a depth he couldn't fathom, a quiet intensity that was suddenly unsettling. "No, Captain," she said, her voice gaining a surprising resonance that cut through the lingering chuckles, silencing them instantly. "A standard silhouette will be sufficient." The word sufficient hung in the air, not as a concession, but as a quiet, understated declaration of capability. The snipers fell silent, their previous amusement draining from their faces, replaced by a mixture of shock and unease. The smugness vanished from Carter's expression, replaced by a flicker of genuine irritation and a dawning realization. He hadn't expected her to accept, let alone with such quiet, unwavering confidence. This was supposed to be a joke, a way to underscore their own elite status, a harmless display of their unchallenged supremacy. Now it had taken an unexpected turn. "All right then, Major," Carter said, his voice now flat, devoid of its earlier mirth, a challenge now hardening his tone. "Range is set for tomorrow sunrise. South end of the reservation. We'll be there. Don't be late." He turned abruptly, his confident swagger now replaced by a more rigid, almost defensive stride, and led his entourage out, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. The armory, typically a place of organized chaos, now felt strangely vacant, echoing with the ghost of the impossible wager. Callista watched them go, her expression unreadable, no trace of triumph, no hint of nervousness. She returned to her SR-25, her movements regaining their practiced rhythm, but there was a subtle tension in her shoulders, a coiled energy that hadn't been there before. The armory, once a sanctuary of quiet, anonymous work, now hummed with the echoes of a challenge that no one truly believed she could win. The stage was set, not for a competition, but for a revelation. The next morning, before the sun had fully breached the eastern horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple, fiery orange, and nascent gold, the designated firing point was already bustling. A small crowd of curious onlookers, a mix of off-duty soldiers, eager range officers, and even some higher-ranking brass who had caught wind of the impossible wager, had gathered. Binoculars and spotting scopes were already trained on the distant horizon, where the 4,000-meter target was barely a smudge against the vastness of the Colorado Plains. Even with the highest-powered optics, identifying it would be a challenge, let alone aiming for and hitting it. The very idea was a whispered impossibility. Captain Carter was there, along with his team, their cutting-edge rifles meticulously set up on heavy, specialized tripods, anchored firmly to the earth, their spotters hunched over kestrel weather meters, calling out precise wind speeds, humidity percentages, and ambient temperatures, feeding data into handheld ballistic computers. The air was crisp, the wind fickle, swirling currents making long-range calculations a nightmare, demanding constant, minute adjustments. They had been there for hours, meticulously calibrating their scopes, running endless ballistic computations, and making frustrating test shots that fell woefully short or drifted wildly off course, swallowed by the sheer, overwhelming distance. The frustration was palpable in their tight jaws and strained eyes, a testament to the unforgiving nature of the challenge. Then, just as the first rays of sunlight kissed the highest peaks, Callista arrived. She walked towards the firing line, not with the confident stride of a seasoned shooter entering a competition, but with the quiet, almost ethereal grace of someone moving through their natural element, as if the ground itself welcomed her steps. She carried no elaborate gear, no specialized wind gauges, no imposing tripod. Just a single well-worn Pelican case, its surface scuffed and bearing the marks of countless journeys. The murmurs died down as she reached the line, a sudden collective silence falling over the assembled crowd. Carter, his face already etched with the strain of his own failed attempts and the frustration of the morning, regarded her with a mixture of annoyance and a faint, grudging curiosity, tinged with a flicker of hope that she might somehow provide an answer. "Morning, Major," he grunted, not bothering to hide his fatigue or the slight tremor in his hands. "Ready to see how the real pros struggle with the laws of physics?" Callista simply offered a small, polite nod, her eyes scanning the distant horizon, observing something only she could perceive. She knelt beside the designated firing point, opening her pelican case with the quiet click of latches. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was a rifle unlike any they had expected to see from the armory. It wasn't the latest military-issue long-range behemoth or a precision rifle fresh from a custom shop. It was an older model, a custom-built .50 BMG rifle, its action-worn smooth, its blued steel barrel bearing the faint, almost imperceptible marks of countless uses and reloads. Its stock, though sturdy, showed the faint patina of age and handling. Its scope, though high magnification and clearly top-tier, seemed almost archaic compared to the digital marvels and laser rangefinders arrayed around them, the kind of glass that demanded a different kind of skill. It was a weapon that spoke of history, of a personal connection, of a symbiotic relationship forged over time, not of cutting-edge technology. She assembled it with fluid, unhurried movements, her hands moving with a familiar, almost affectionate rhythm, as if reconnecting with an old, trusted friend. She didn't bother with a heavy, multi-axis tripod. Instead, she produced a simple yet sturdy canvas sandbag, which she carefully positioned. She settled herself into a prone position behind the rifle, her body perfectly aligned, her breathing already deep and measured, a testament to years of disciplined practice. She didn't consult any instruments, didn't ask about the wind, didn't glance at the weather data. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, an almost meditative pause, as if listening to the subtle whispers of the air, the distant hum of the world. Moments stretched into an eternity. The tension was so thick you could almost taste it, a dry, metallic tang in the air. The other snipers, who had been loudly discussing their own challenges and offering unsolicited advice, were now utterly silent, their own breathing unconsciously mirroring hers, shallow and held. They strained their eyes, trying to see what she saw, trying to comprehend the impossible calculations she must be making, if any at all. The wind shifted again, a sudden gust rustling the dry grass near the firing line, sending dust devils dancing across the range, but she didn't react. She was utterly still, her focus absolute, a single point of unwavering concentration in a world of variables. Then she exhaled slowly, a long, controlled release of air, her breath a mere wisp in the crisp morning. Her finger, a mere extension of her will, found the trigger, settling with a feather-light touch. The world seemed to hold its breath, hushed in anticipation. A single thunderous report ripped through the morning silence. The .50 BMG roared, a primal scream of unleashed power, sending a shockwave rippling across the range, vibrating through the very ground beneath their feet. The recoil was immense, a monumental force, but Callista absorbed it with practiced ease, her body barely shifting, her gaze fixed. All eyes, already straining, snapped towards the distant 4,000-meter target, a tiny, almost invisible speck on the horizon. For a fraction of a second there was nothing but the vast emptiness, the sun-drenched plains stretching endlessly. Then a tiny, almost imperceptible puff of dust blossomed around the target, like a whispered secret. It seemed to expand, growing rapidly, and then, with a delayed thwack that finally reached their ears across the immense distance, the silhouette target at 4,000 meters didn't just fall, it exploded. The cheap metal and cardboard disintegrated into a shower of shrapnel and debris, a violent cloud of dust and shredded material erupting against the distant horizon, a silent, unequivocal testament to an impact of unimaginable force and absolute precision. It was not merely a hit, it was a detonation, a complete annihilation of the target. A collective gasp swept through the crowd, a symphony of disbelief and astonishment, laced with a touch of profound, unsettling fear. Carter, who had been watching through his own spotting scope, slowly lowered it, his jaw slack, his face pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror and grudging respect. Sergeant First Class Miller dropped his binoculars, his hands trembling, utterly speechless. The other snipers stared, their confident bravado utterly shattered, their carefully constructed world of ballistic certainty crumbling before their eyes. The impossible had not only happened, it had occurred with a devastating finality. Callista slowly rose from her prone position, the massive rifle seemingly weightless in her hands. She offered another small, almost imperceptible nod to no one in particular, her face still serene, betraying no hint of effort or triumph. She then began to methodically disassemble the 50 BMG, her movements as calm and unhurried as if she had just cleaned a routine service pistol. Each component was carefully wiped clean, meticulously returned to its foam cradle. She packed it back into her Pelican case, closed it with 2 soft clicks, and turned to walk away, leaving behind a bewildered crowd and a target that no longer existed, a smoking crater where a challenge once stood. But as she walked, the whispers began. They started as hushed murmurs near the firing line, then spread like wildfire through the base, carried on the wind, echoing through the barracks, across the mess hall, and into the highest echelons of command. The initial disbelief morphed into awe, then into a burgeoning legend, a myth whispered in the making. Did you hear? 4K, 1 shot, direct hit, blew the damn thing to pieces. The armorer, Major Rhodes? No way. They're calling her Ghost 9. Said she just walked up, shot, and walked off like it was nothing. Her name, once barely a whisper in the armory, now spread like wildfire. Major Callista Rhodes. Ghost 9, the quiet armorer, hidden in plain sight, had been revealed as something far more profound, a hidden force of nature, a legend reborn in the dust of an impossible shot. The military world, which had dismissed her, now whispered her name with a mixture of reverence and fear, utterly captivated by the enigma of the woman who could make a rifle sing a song of distant thunder beyond the reach of human understanding. The ghost had shown herself, and nothing would ever be the same. The world had just met Callista Rhodes, and it had no idea what was coming next. The whispers of Ghost 9 had morphed into a roar, reverberating through the hallowed halls of military intelligence and special operations. Fort Carson, once a quiet, unassuming backdrop for Major Callista Rhodes, was now a vortex of speculation. Her impossible shot had peeled back the layers of her carefully constructed anonymity, exposing a past that the military thought it had buried, or at least strategically forgotten. The reverberations reached the office of Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Holloway, a man whose career had been defined by discretion and an uncanny ability to connect disparate pieces of intelligence. Holloway was a strategist, a chess master of the shadows, and the sudden emergence of Ghost 9 was a puzzle he was determined to solve. Holloway's office, a Spartan space adorned only with maps and strategic diagrams, smelled faintly of stale coffee and relentless work. He sat hunched over his desk, not looking at classified reports, but at old grainy photographs and faded mission debriefs. One particular file, marked Ghost Ridge, classified, eyes only, lay open, its pages crinkling with age. He had seen the grainy video footage from the 4,000-meter shot, the impossible explosion of the target. His mind, however, immediately leaped past the spectacle to a cold, remote mountain range half a world away, a place of icy winds and brutal silence. Flashbacks, unbidden and sharp, sliced through the quiet of his office. Years ago, a highly classified ghost team, a unit so elite their existence was barely acknowledged, had been ambushed during a critical intel retrieval operation on a treacherous ridge known as Ghost Ridge. The mission was a surgical strike, meant to be swift and silent. Instead, it had erupted into a brutal, one-sided firefight. Holloway remembered the fragmented comms, the desperate calls for extraction, the sickening realization that his best operators were being systematically cut down by unseen marksmen. The enemy fire was precise, relentless, coming from positions thought to be unassailable. His team was pinned, taking heavy casualties, teetering on the brink of complete annihilation. Then, from nowhere, the tide had turned. A series of impossibly accurate, devastatingly powerful shots had ripped through the enemy lines. Not suppressive fire, but precision eliminations. Enemy snipers, who had held the ghost team at their mercy, suddenly fell, their positions silenced with shocking efficiency. High-value targets, hidden deep within fortified positions, were neutralized with single, crushing impacts that tore through cover that should have been impenetrable. It was as if a ghost had descended upon the ridge, an unseen hand tipping the scales of certain defeat. The surviving ghost team members had managed to extract, battered but alive, pulled back from the precipice by an unknown, impossible savior. The debriefs, cloaked in layers of secrecy, referred only to an unidentified support asset, a phantom marksman whose capabilities defied all known parameters. They called her the Unseen Sniper, a whisper of a legend that permeated the special operations community but was never officially acknowledged. Holloway had been the lead intelligence officer on that mission. He knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that the Ghost Ridge mission had been compromised. Only a handful of individuals had known the precise coordinates, the timing, the team composition. The ambush was too perfect, too devastatingly effective to be mere chance. Someone had leaked the information from within, a viper in the ranks, a betrayal that had cost good men their lives and left a scar on his conscience. He had pursued every lead, hit every dead end, watched countless careers wither under suspicion, but the traitor remained elusive, a shadow in the deepest corners of the military establishment. Now, looking at Major Callista Rhodes's personnel file, cross-referencing her almost blank service record from before Fort Carson with the highly classified Ghost Ridge report, a chilling pattern began to emerge. The timelines, the locations, the specific, almost superhuman capabilities described in the debriefs, it all pointed to one person. The unseen sniper was not just a myth, she was Callista Rhodes. And the 4,000-meter shot was not a fluke, it was merely a public demonstration of a mastery honed in the crucible of clandestine warfare. Holloway arranged a discreet meeting. Callista arrived at his office, her expression as unreadable as ever. She stood ramrod straight, her arms at her sides, a quiet sentinel. She offered no greeting, no apology for the disruption she had caused. She simply waited, an embodiment of stoicism. "Major Rhodes," Holloway began, his voice low, devoid of rank or formality, speaking as one professional to another. "Please, have a seat." Callista sat, her movements fluid and economical, settling into the chair as if it were a natural extension of her own quiet presence. She still said nothing, her eyes, those unsettlingly clear blue eyes, fixed on his, unblinking. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries, Major," Holloway continued, leaning forward, his voice a conspiratorial murmur. "Or with feigned surprise. I've spent the last 48 hours connecting dots that go back to Ghost Ridge." Callista's expression remained unchanged, but a flicker, infinitesimally small, passed through her eyes, a fleeting shadow of a long-buried memory. It was the only sign she gave. The unseen sniper, Holloway stated, watching her closely. "That was you, wasn't it? You saved what was left of that team. You performed miracles on that ridge, Major. Miracles no human should have been capable of." A beat of silence. Then Callista's voice, quiet as ever but resonant with an undeniable truth. "I complete missions, Lieutenant Colonel." Holloway nodded slowly. "Indeed, you do. And what you did on Ghost Ridge wasn't just completing a mission. It was rewriting the book on what a single operator could achieve. But that mission, Major, was compromised. Badly compromised. Someone leaked critical intel. And that's why the ambush was so effective." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "We never found the source. The trail went cold. But the memory and the burning need for justice never did." He pushed a file across the desk, a digital tablet displaying images of a sprawling mountain resort, a luxurious fortress nestled amidst jagged peaks. "Which brings me to my offer. A new assignment. Top priority. We have intelligence, fragmented but credible, that a summit is taking place in the Pamir Mountains. A collection of the world's most dangerous individuals, arms dealers, financiers of terror, masterminds of global instability. We believe Nikolai Vronsky will be among them." Callista's eyes, which had remained largely impassive, narrowed fractionally at the mention of the name. Vronsky. The name echoed in her mind, a cold, hard knot of memory. He was a phantom, a ghost of a man, former Spetsnaz, now a shadowy arms dealer, rumored to be the orchestrator of the Ghost Ridge ambush, the man whose hands were covered in the blood of her original Ghost team. He had always been out of reach, a target too elusive, too well protected. "We need confirmation, Major," Holloway continued, unaware of the specific personal resonance of the name for Callista. Absolute, undeniable visual confirmation of Vronsky's presence, and, if possible, any intelligence on his associates or their plans. A clean surgical intelligence acquisition. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. The location is remote, hostile, and heavily guarded. Any conventional approach is suicide, but for a ghost. He let the sentence trail off, his gaze fixed on her. For someone who can disappear, observe, and engage from distances thought impossible, you are our only option.
Callista was silent for a long moment, processing the information, her mind already calculating angles, wind currents, and evasion routes.
The Pamirs were brutal, unforgiving, a challenge even for the most seasoned mountaineers, let alone a covert operative carrying precision equipment. But the name Vronsky resonated within her, a deeply buried, painful echo. This was not just a mission, it was a chance to finally face the architect of her past trauma. Finally, Callista spoke. Her voice was still quiet, but there was an unyielding resolve in its depths. "I'll take the assignment, Lieutenant Colonel." Holloway felt a wave of relief wash over him, quickly followed by a sense of professional admiration. She was remarkable. "Excellent, Major. You'll have full authorization. Any resources you need, they're yours. Tactical support, air assets, communications." On one condition, Callista interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "I pick the team." Holloway raised an eyebrow, surprised but intrigued. "Your prerogative, Major. Who do you have in mind?" "Sergeant Dalton Reeve," Callista stated without hesitation, "and 2 others of my choosing once I've assessed their capabilities." Holloway frowned slightly. "Dalton Reeve? Major, with all due respect, Sergeant Reeve is a highly capable sniper, but he was among those who, well, he was rather vocal in his skepticism yesterday. He was one of Captain Carter's closest confidants. He was referring to Dalton, who had been among the most dismissive in the armory, mocking her most vocally before her impossible shot. "Precisely," Callista replied, her expression still unreadable. "He doubted me. He saw what I can do. Now he will learn. He will learn to truly see." There was no malice in her voice, only a cold, dispassionate logic. It was not about punishing Dalton, but about forging him, about ensuring the team was built on a foundation of undeniable truth, not preconceived notions. He would be her spotter, her eyes on the ground, and he needed to be absolutely aligned with her capabilities, free of lingering doubt. He had been a skeptic, but he had also witnessed the impossible, and that transformative experience, she knew, would make him either a bitter enemy or an unshakable ally. She preferred the latter. Holloway studied her for a moment longer, a faint smile touching his lips. He understood. It was a bold move, a calculated risk to turn a doubter into a believer, to forge loyalty through undeniable demonstration.
As you wish, Major Sergeant Reeve it is.
You'll have full autonomy in selecting the rest of your field team. They'll undergo a rapid intensive assessment under your direct supervision. We'll set up a secure training facility immediately. Mission parameters will be briefed in detail tomorrow. Code name for the operation, Silent Echo. Callista rose from her chair, her quiet presence filling the room once more. Understood, Lieutenant Colonel. She turned to leave, her form already dissolving back into the shadows from which she had briefly emerged. As she walked away, Holloway leaned back in his chair, a profound sense of anticipation settling over him. Callista Rhodes, Ghost 9, the unseen sniper. She was more than just a legend, she was a force, a weapon unlike any other. And now, she was stepping back into the fray, drawn by the echoes of a past betrayal, aimed directly at the heart of a new, dangerous future. The mystery of the Ghost Ridge leak still gnawed at him, a festering wound in the military's integrity. Perhaps with Callista now involved, with her unique ability to expose hidden truths, the shadow of the traitor might finally be unmasked. The Pamir Mountains awaited, and with them the potential to finally settle old scores and prevent new global threats. The world outside Fort Carson blurred into a whirlwind of classified briefings, rapid assessments, and an almost brutal selection process for Major Callista Rhodes's team. She moved with a silent authority that demanded respect, her eyes missing nothing, her judgment swift and final. Specialist Rivera, a former Olympic biathlete with an uncanny endurance and a hawk-like eye for terrain, was chosen for reconnaissance and security. Sergeant Kwan, a brilliant, almost unnervingly quiet communication specialist, whose fingers danced across keyboards with the speed of thought, was brought in for interception and extraction logistics. And, as per Callista's insistence, Sergeant Dalton Reeve joined them, his initial skepticism replaced by a grudging respect that bordered on awe after witnessing her impossible shot. He was still processing the paradigm shift, but the shift was undeniable. He had seen the future of long-range engagement, and it looked nothing like what he'd been taught. The journey to the Pamir Mountains was a blur of military transports, clandestine airlifts, and hushed instructions. They landed in a desolate, windswept valley under the cloak of a moonless night, the towering, snow-capped peaks of the roof of the world looming like silent, ancient sentinels around them. The air was thin, biting, carving into their lungs with every breath. This was not just a mission, it was an endurance test, a brutal ballet against an unforgiving landscape. Altitude sickness will be your enemy before any human opposition, Callista had warned them during a final briefing. Her voice clipped, devoid of emotion. Pace yourselves, hydrate, and listen to the mountains. They will tell you more than any satellite image. They moved like wraiths through the rugged, unforgiving terrain. Days merged into a punishing rhythm of ascent, each step a struggle against the altitude and the treacherous footing. Rivera, with her biathlon training, moved with an almost unnatural grace, her eyes constantly sweeping the treacherous slopes, identifying potential threats or hidden paths. Quan, despite his desk-bound expertise, proved surprisingly resilient, his focus unwavering even as his body screamed in protest. Dalton, however, struggled visibly. The thin air clawed at his lungs, his muscles ached with a relentless fire, and the sheer scale of the Pamirs dwarfed his conventional combat experience. He was a master of flat-range precision, of calculated variables. Here, the variables were overwhelming, alive, and indifferent to his expertise. He watched Callista, who moved with an effortless fluidity, as if the mountains themselves bowed to her will. She never seemed to tire, her breathing always calm, her gaze constantly sweeping the distant ridges, deciphering the silent language of the wind and snow. She was a different breed of soldier, an apex predator perfectly adapted to her environment. How do you do it, Major?" Dalton rasped one frigid evening, huddled in a makeshift shelter, gazing up at the impossibly high peaks, their summits lost in the swirling clouds. "It's like you're part of this place." Callista, her face illuminated by the faint glow of a tactical map, didn't look up. "Adaptation, Sergeant, and respect for the environment. The mountains do not care for your ego, only your perseverance. Your body will follow your will, if your will is strong enough." Her words were not comforting, but factual, an undeniable truth that resonated with the raw physical pain he was enduring. Their target was a newly constructed, highly secretive luxury compound nestled deep within a secluded valley, a modern fortress of glass and steel incongruously set amidst the ancient, jagged landscape. Intelligence indicated it was a privately owned resort, built by an enigmatic billionaire, a perfect, isolated venue for illicit global summits. Their task was to reach a concealed observation post, positioned over 5,000 meters away on an opposing ridge, a seemingly impossible distance that only Callista's unique capabilities could bridge. The ascent to the observation post was the most grueling part. They climbed for hours, using specialized gear, their breath fogging in the sub-zero air. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at their clothing, threatening to rip them from the sheer rock face. Dalton, gasping for air, clung to the icy rock, his vision blurring. He risked a glance at Callista, who was leading the climb, her movements precise and unyielding, a picture of absolute control. He realized then that her ability to hit targets at unthinkable distances wasn't just about optics or ballistics. It was about an almost preternatural connection to the environment, a deep understanding of physics and a mastery over her own body and mind that allowed her to operate where others failed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the designated observation point. It was a small, sheltered alcove, perfectly camouflaged, offering a clear, unobstructed view of the distant compound. The sheer drop below was dizzying, and the compound, even through high-powered optics, still looked impossibly far, a tiny architectural model nestled in the vast expanse of the valley. Quan immediately began setting up his communication gear, a complex array of antennas and encryption devices, his fingers already flying across a keyboard, sifting through the cacophony of electromagnetic signals. Rivera established their perimeter, her rifle scanning the surrounding ridges, her eyes sharp and watchful. Callista, meanwhile, began her setup. She produced her custom .50 BMG rifle, assembling it with the familiar, almost ritualistic care that Dalton had witnessed before. But this time, her movements were imbued with a different kind of intensity. Her face, usually impassive, held a subtle tension, a flicker of something deeply personal. "Target acquisition," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind as she focused her scope on the distant compound. Dalton, acting as her spotter, brought his own high-powered optic to bear, adjusting for mirage and shimmer. As Callista scanned the compound, a sudden chilling revelation hit her. Through the powerful scope, she focused on a figure stepping out onto a high balcony, a man whose profile, even from this incredible distance, was unmistakable. The cold, precise features, the way he carried himself, the unmistakable aura of power and ruthlessness. Vronsky, Callista breathed, the name a harsh whisper, a raw, almost guttural sound that surprised Dalton. Her voice was usually devoid of such emotion, but now a barely suppressed rage simmered beneath the surface. It was Nikolai Vronsky, the man behind the ambush that had killed her original ghost team, the architect of her deepest trauma, the ghost that had haunted her for years. He wasn't just among the attendees, he was a central figure, seemingly orchestrating the entire summit. Dalton, alerted by her tone, focused his own scope. He saw the man, a formidable figure even at this distance. "You know him, Major?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. He had seen the name in the briefing, but hadn't connected it to Callista's past, beyond the general mission parameters. "He is the reason for Ghost Ridge, Sergeant," Callista replied, her voice now flat, devoid of emotion, but with an underlying current of ice. "He is the Viper." As they continued to observe, gathering intel, something else became horrifyingly clear. Quan, monitoring the encrypted communications, suddenly cursed under his breath. "Major, Lieutenant Colonel Holloway, listen to this." He piped a distorted, heavily encrypted audio feed into their comms. It was a conversation, fragmented but chillingly clear, discussing security measures, anticipating a possible approach. A voice, heavily accented and cold, stated, "Our intelligence indicates a potential for a long-range infiltration. Enhanced air defense, perimeter sensors active. They know we're here. They know someone is coming." The words hung heavy in the frigid air. "They know," Dalton repeated, his voice incredulous. "How could they know? This location is supposed to be untraceable. This mission was compartmentalized." Callista's face, which had been etched with the cold fire of vengeance, now settled into a mask of grim realization. This wasn't just Vronsky. This was a confirmation of her deepest, most painful suspicion. The intel leak from Ghost Ridge, the betrayal that had cost her everything, was still active. Vronsky knew. He was expecting them. The phantom traitor, the one who had condemned her team years ago, was still operating, still burrowed deep within the military's ranks, feeding information to the enemy. The summit wasn't just a meeting of criminals. It was a trap, or at least a highly anticipated confrontation. The pieces clicked into place, forming a terrifying mosaic of long-standing treachery. The silence of the Pamirs was now filled with the unsettling echo of a deep, pervasive betrayal. The hunt for Vronsky had suddenly become part of a much larger, darker game. The chilling revelation that Nikolai Vronsky knew of their presence, that the ghost of betrayal still haunted their operations, solidified the frigid air of the Pamir Mountains into a suffocating shroud of tension. Major Callista Rhodes, usually a beacon of detached professionalism, now carried an unspoken weight. The name Vronsky hung between them, a tangible presence, a shared history of blood and loss. Dalton, once a skeptic, now watched her with an almost desperate intensity, seeing not just the legendary sniper but the woman beneath, burdened by a past he was only now beginning to comprehend. The knowledge that the Ghost Ridge traitor was still active, still leaking information, added a venomous edge to their already precarious mission. This was no longer just an intelligence-gathering operation, it was a ghost hunt within a ghost hunt. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the subtle shifts in light and the relentless assault of the wind. Callista remained at her scope, observing, absorbing every detail of the distant compound. Rivera maintained their perimeter, a silent, vigilant guardian. Quan, headphones clamped over his ears, continuously monitored the encrypted chatter, searching for any further clues, any confirmation of the traitor's reach. Dalton, positioned beside Callista, served as her spotter, But his true role had become something more profound. He was her silent confidant, her witness, the recipient of her unspoken burden. He meticulously recorded data, cross-referenced targets and performed calculations, but his eyes kept drifting to Callista's profile, searching for answers in her stoic stillness. The compound below buzzed with a muted activity. Vehicles arrived and departed. Figures moved within the brightly lit interiors. Shadows danced behind tinted glass. The summit, clearly, was in full swing, a convergence of the world's most dangerous minds. Callista identified key figures, cross-referencing them with the intel Holloway had provided. Vronsky remained the central star, often seen directing others, his presence radiating an undeniable sinister authority. As the pre-dawn darkness began to soften into the pale light of a new day, Callista began the final preparations for the shot. The wind, though still a factor, had settled slightly, offering a brief window of relative stability. She checked her rifle, its custom-built components humming with latent power. Dalton prepared his spotting scope, meticulously calibrating for the variables. The air was charged with anticipation, a silent countdown to the moment of truth. Wind at 7 o'clock, constant at 12 knots. Dalton murmured, his voice low, professional, yet edged with a nervous excitement. Temperature -15°C, humidity low, mirage minimal. He rattled off the data, running the numbers through his ballistic computer. Trajectory adjusted for altitude, spin drift, Coriolis effect, target solution green, major. Callista nodded, her eye already at the scope. The world shrinking to the crosshairs and the impossibly distant compound. She could feel the familiar pull of the rifle, the deep-seated knowledge of its capabilities and of her own. This was it, the moment she had lived for, the moment that had been both a torment and a driving force. Vronsky. He was there, a clear, unmistakable target in her scope, a silent invitation to vengeance. Dalton watched her, his breath held. He knew what she had to do. The intelligence was confirmed. The mission objective was technically met. But vengeance, he felt, was an unstated yet powerful secondary objective. This was Callista's chance, her opportunity to finally extract a measure of justice, to put an end to the man who had orchestrated the annihilation of her team. He could almost feel the weight of her past pressing down on her, urging her to take the shot, to bring a definitive end to the architect of her pain. He saw her finger subtly twitch, hovering over the trigger. His heart pounded in his chest, anticipating the thunderous report that would signal not just a hit, but an ending. He imagined the bullet leaving the barrel, a tiny, unstoppable projectile screaming across 5,000 meters of unforgiving air, a silent judgment hurtling towards Vronsky. He pictured the impact, the sudden violent finality that would rock the compound, sending a ripple of fear through the assembled criminals. It would be a message, a clear, undeniable statement from Ghost 9. Callista's breathing deepened, becoming slower, more deliberate, reaching that zen-like state of absolute control. Her finger tightened on the trigger, a hair's breadth from engagement. Dalton held his breath, his eyes glued to his spotting scope, ready to confirm the kill, ready to witness the justice he felt she deserved. Then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, just as the very air seemed to crackle with the impending shot, Callista's finger moved, but not in the way Dalton expected. The thunderous roar of the 50 BMG ripped through the morning silence, echoing across the vast Pamir Valley. The kick of the rifle was immense, familiar, but the trajectory, the chosen point of impact, was not what Dalton had anticipated. His eyes, already fixed on the compound, saw it instantly. The bullet, a silver streak of vengeance, did not fly towards Vronsky, did not impact the central building or any of the high-value targets. Instead, with devastating pinpoint accuracy, it screamed towards the side of the compound, slamming into something large and metallic, something located discreetly behind the main facility. There was a blinding flash of blue-white light, a shower of sparks, and then a sickening crunch of tortured metal. The facility's massive transformer, a vital nexus of power nestled within its own reinforced cage, simply disintegrated. It exploded not with the visceral violence of a direct hit on a human target, but with the explosive concussive force of an electrical grid collapsing. Instantly, the entire compound was plunged into absolute suffocating blackout. The brilliant lights that had illuminated the facility vanished. The hum of generators died. The intricate security systems, the surveillance cameras, the motion sensors, the electronic locks, all went dark, silent, inert. The sophisticated fortress, moments ago a hive of activity, became a vast, inert shadow against the rising sun. Panic, a tangible wave, rippled through the compound, visible even from 5,000 meters away as distant figures stumbled in the sudden absolute darkness. Dalton stared, his mouth agape. He lowered his spotting scope, his mind reeling. He had anticipated a kill shot. He had expected vengeance. He had expected the ending to Vronsky's reign of terror. Instead, Callista had chosen a different target, a strategic, almost surgical strike on the compound's very lifeblood. The blackout was not an accident. It was a signal. Moments later, the distant sky, still heavy with the remnants of night, began to fill with the familiar roar of approaching aircraft. Not just one or two, but a squadron. Helicopters, black and menacing, streaked towards the now darkened compound, their searchlights cutting through the gloom. Simultaneously, from multiple directions, ground forces, a coordinated multi-agency joint operation that had been waiting in the wings, surged towards the now vulnerable fortress. The sudden silence from the compound was met by the overwhelming cacophony of an orchestrated assault. Dalton turned to Callista, who was already meticulously disassembling her rifle, her face once again a mask of quiet composure. His voice was a strangled whisper, a mixture of awe, confusion, and a hint of profound disappointment. "Major, Vronsky was there. He was right there. You had him. Why? Why the transformer? Why not him?" The question hung in the cold, thin air, loaded with years of unaddressed pain and the expectation of justice. Callista didn't stop her work, her movements precise and unhurried. She didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the components of her rifle, her hands working with their usual, almost meditative rhythm. After a long moment, as the sounds of the distant assault grew louder, she finally spoke, her voice quiet, steady, devoid of any discernible emotion, yet resonating with an undeniable authority. "Ghost 9 completes mission, Sergeant," she said, each word deliberate, cutting through the chaos. "We don't kill out of vengeance, we remove threats. And sometimes the most effective way to remove a threat isn't to take a life, but to dismantle the infrastructure that supports it, to expose the shadows, to deliver them into the light." Dalton stood there, stunned. Her words echoed in the profound silence that had fallen between them, a silence made all the more stark by the distant roar of the unfolding operation. He had expected a brutal finality, a personal reckoning. Instead, he had witnessed a strategic masterstroke, a decision made with cold, calculated precision, entirely devoid of the emotional baggage he had projected onto her. Callista Rhodes was not just a sniper. She was an instrument, a scalpel used to cut through the Gordian knots of global threats. And in that moment, as he watched the distant compound being swarmed by the forces unleashed by her single, precise shot, Dalton Reeve realized the true, terrifying depth of her purpose and the chilling, uncompromising clarity of her resolve. Vengeance was a human weakness. Mission completion for Ghost 9 was an absolute. The strategic brilliance of Major Callista Rhodes's single impossible shot echoed far beyond the Pamir Mountains. The blackout at the hidden summit had plunged Nikolai Vronsky's stronghold into chaos, blinding his security, severing his communications, and leaving the world's most dangerous criminals vulnerable. The multi-agency joint operation, launched in the immediate aftermath of Callista's precision strike, swept through the compound with overwhelming force. Vronsky, caught entirely by surprise, was captured amidst the confusion, his network of illicit dealings laid bare. The intel retrieved from the raid was a treasure trove, a digital web of global threats, financial conduits for terror, and intricate arms trafficking routes. Within weeks, multiple international plots were thwarted, major criminal enterprises dismantled, and countless lives saved, all thanks to the quiet woman who had chosen a transformer over a direct kill. Back at Fort Carson, the atmosphere was one of quiet triumph. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Holloway stood in the Situation Room watching the final reports trickle in, a rare, satisfied smile playing on his lips. The operation, codenamed Silent Echo, had been an unqualified success, a textbook example of high-stakes intelligence acquisition and surgical intervention. But even amidst the victory, a lingering shadow remained, one that haunted Holloway as much as it did Callista. He watched her from afar in the following days, a ghost once more within the familiar confines of the armory. She had returned to her routine, her hands meticulously cleaning weapons, her presence as understated as ever. The whispers of Ghost 9 still followed her, but they were now tinged with a new layer of respect, a recognition of her unique, almost alien pragmatism. She had proven to be not just a weapon, but a strategic asset of unparalleled value, a mind that operated on a different plane of existence. Holloway knew, however, that her mission was far from over, at least in her own mind. The revelation that Vronsky had been anticipating their arrival, that he knew a long-range infiltration was coming, resonated with the chilling reality of the Ghost Ridge ambush. It wasn't just a rogue informant, it was a deeply embedded traitor, a leak reaching into the highest echelons of command. Callista, he suspected, felt this truth with an almost visceral certainty. Her pursuit of the Viper was not merely professional, it was personal, a silent promise to her fallen team. He found her late one evening, alone in the armory, the air thick with the scent of solvents. The lights were low, casting long dancing shadows. She was reassembling her custom .50 BMG rifle, its sleek form gleaming under the solitary overhead lamp. "Major Rhodes," Holloway said, his voice quiet, not wanting to startle her. Callista didn't flinch. She simply continued her work, her movements precise. "Lieutenant Colonel," she acknowledged without looking up. Holloway walked closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "The intel from the Pamirs is immense. We've rolled up more cells in the past month than in the last year combined. Vronsky is singing, giving up everything to avoid a black site. It's a massive win, Major. You made it possible." "The mission was completed," Callista stated, her voice flat, acknowledging the fact without pride. "It was more than completed," Holloway insisted, a hint of admiration in his tone. "It was masterfully executed, but we both know there's more to it, don't we? Vronsky knew we were coming. He knew about a long-range infiltration. That points to one thing, Major, the leak from Ghost Ridge. It's still active." Callista finally paused, her hands still on the rifle. She looked up, her clear blue eyes meeting his. "It was never just one leak, Lieutenant Colonel. It was a well-placed source, someone with access, with trust, someone in high command." Her voice was quiet, but the words carried the cold weight of conviction. "They sold my team. They sold this operation too." Holloway nodded slowly, grim-faced. "My thoughts exactly." We're running every shred of data from Vronsky's network, cross-referencing communications, bank transfers, anything that might point to an internal connection. It's like searching for a ghost in a hurricane. They're good, Major. Very good. They underestimate, Callista replied, her gaze returning to her rifle. They always do. The implication hung in the air. They underestimated me then and they underestimate me now. She wasn't just referring to Vronsky, she was referring to the phantom betrayer. Holloway understood. The hunt wasn't over. It had simply shifted focus. While we sift through the mountain of intel, Major, there's another matter: your extraordinary capabilities. They cannot remain a secret. Not anymore. The 4,000-meter shot saw to that. Callista remained silent, a slight tension in her shoulders. She valued her anonymity, her quiet existence. The limelight was anathema to her. We're establishing a new program, Holloway continued, pressing forward. An elite sniper program, top-tier clandestine operations focused on impossible engagements, intelligence acquisition, and strategic deterrence. We need a lead instructor. Someone who can teach not just the physics, but the philosophy. Someone who can unlock the impossible in others. You are the only person capable of running it, Major. Callista slowly closed her rifle case. She turned, facing him fully. I don't teach, I execute. You can do both, Holloway countered gently. Imagine the impact, cultivating a new generation of operators with your principles, your precision, passing on what you see that others can't. It's a force multiplier beyond anything we currently possess, and it would give you the necessary access, the clearance, to continue your own quiet work, to search for your ghost. Her eyes narrowed slightly, considering the proposition. The mention of access and search for your ghost was the only lever that could move her. It was a trade, her anonymity for the tools to finally uncover the truth. After a long, measured pause, Callista gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Understood, Lieutenant Colonel. And so, Major Callista Rhodes, Ghost 9, resumed her quiet life, but now it was a quiet life with a new purpose. She was no longer just the armorer, she was the architect of a new era of precision. The elite sniper program was established quickly, shrouded in the same secrecy that had once surrounded her. The candidates were hand-picked, drawn from the best of the best, but even they struggled to grasp the fundamental concepts Callista instilled. Her classroom was the vast open range, not a sterile lecture hall. Her lessons weren't just about ballistics tables, they were about patience, about understanding the unseen currents of the air, the subtle language of light and shadow, the art of becoming one with the environment. She pushed them beyond their perceived limits, forcing them to shed their conventional wisdom and embrace a new way of seeing. She rarely raised her voice, but her quiet intensity commanded absolute attention, her critiques sharp and incisive, cutting to the core of their flaws. Sergeant Dalton Reeve, once her most vocal skeptic, became her assistant instructor. The transformation in him was profound. The swagger had been replaced by humility, the arrogance by a quiet reverence. He had witnessed her impossible shot. He had seen her strategic choice in the Pamirs, and he had heard her cold, unwavering logic. He had shed his past biases and become a true believer, utterly dedicated to understanding her methods. He was her shadow, her most ardent student, meticulously documenting her techniques, translating her almost mystical insights into repeatable drills for the bewildered recruits. She doesn't just shoot the target, sir, Dalton explained to a visiting general, his voice filled with an almost reverent awe. She understands the target, the bullet, the air, the earth itself. It's like she's conducting a symphony with physics. Callista watched him, a faint, almost imperceptible nod of approval. Dalton was changing, evolving, beginning to see in a way few others could. He was becoming an extension of her purpose, a bridge between her silent world and the analytical minds of the military. He was her most promising student and her most trusted confidant in the quiet, ongoing hunt for the ghost in their ranks. The shadows within the military's command structure still existed, but now Callista had her own light, her own growing team, ready to unmask them. The game had truly begun. The elite sniper program blossomed under Major Callista Rhodes's unwavering guidance, transforming Fort Carson into a crucible of unparalleled precision. What had once been a place of her careful anonymity now hummed with the focused intensity of a unique training regimen, one that defied conventional military pedagogy. The recruits, a hand-picked cadre of the sharpest marksmen from American Special Forces and select, highly vetted operators from a dozen allied nations, arrived with impressive, often decorated resumes, but quickly found their deeply ingrained preconceived notions of marksmanship shattered. Callista didn't merely teach them to aim for the center of mass. She taught them to understand the very fabric of reality that a bullet traversed, to perceive the world in a way they never imagined possible. Her lessons began not on the dusty firing line, but in simulated environments that meticulously mimicked the world's most challenging and unforgiving terrains. The thin, biting air of towering mountain ranges where every breath was a struggle. The swirling, deceptive heat of vast, desolate deserts, where mirage danced like a mocking phantom, the damp, echoing chill of urban canyons, where wind currents swirled unpredictably between monolithic structures. She compelled them to meditate, to quiet the relentless chatter of their minds, to achieve a state of profound inner stillness that allowed them to listen to the almost imperceptible shifts in air currents, to feel the subtle, vibrational hum of the earth beneath them. She spoke of patience not as a mere virtue, but as a tactical imperative, a deliberate slowing of time until the moment of the shot became an inevitability, a preordained conclusion rather than a hopeful attempt. The rifle is an extension of your will, Callista would articulate, her voice calm, measured, yet resonating with an unyielding authority that compelled their absolute and undivided attention. The bullet is a messenger. Your profound responsibility, your paramount duty, is to ensure its message is delivered with absolute and unblemished clarity, with unwavering truth. But the shot itself, the mere act of pulling the trigger, that shot only truly matters, only truly holds weight, if the reason behind it is unequivocally right. Precision without profound purpose is nothing more than arbitrary destruction. Purpose without absolute precision is merely wishful, ineffectual thinking, a dangerous delusion. Her words resonated deep within their hardened military minds, challenging their very definitions of combat and duty. Sergeant Dalton Reeve, her assistant instructor, had become her most ardent disciple, a profound and undeniable transformation evident in every aspect of his being. The swagger of his former self had been meticulously peeled away, replaced by a deep-seated humility, his earlier arrogance supplanted by a quiet, almost reverent dedication to Callista's teachings. He had witnessed her impossible shot, he had been privy to her strategic choice in the Pamirs, and he had heard her cold, unwavering logic that prioritized mission over personal retribution. He had shed his past biases, his ingrained skepticism, and emerged as a true believer, utterly dedicated to understanding her methods, to dissecting her almost mystical insights. He was her shadow, her most diligent student, meticulously documenting her drills, attempting tirelessly to translate her intuitive mastery into concrete, repeatable steps for the often bewildered recruits. He taught the quantifiable physics, the intricate mathematics, the cold, hard data, while Callista taught the ephemeral art, the profound philosophy, the immeasurable, intangible essence of true marksmanship. He was the sturdy, grounded foundation, and she was the limitless, expansive sky. One brisk morning, during a particularly grueling long-range exercise that stretched their mental and physical limits, a new recruit, Lieutenant Anya Sharma, a sharp, fiercely inquisitive mind from a Tier 1 unit with a reputation for intellectual rigor, approached Callista after a successful 3,000-meter shot that had stunned the entire class with its flawless execution. Sharma, despite her own already impressive capabilities and years of elite training, found herself humbled daily by Callista's seemingly effortless command of impossible distances. "Major," Sharma began, her voice respectful, yet tinged with a genuine curiosity that Callista rarely encountered. "I've meticulously run the numbers. I've studied every conceivable variable, and I believe I can account for the physics involved in those extreme shots. But when you actually take that shot, especially those truly extreme ones, the ones that defy conventional understanding, how do you see a target that far away? I mean, how do you really see it? From this distance, it's often just a pixelated shimmer, a blurred outline against the vastness, indistinguishable from the mirage." She gestured vaguely towards the distant range, her frustration evident in her slightly furrowed brow. Callista paused, her gaze sweeping the distant horizon where the steel target had just disintegrated into a puff of dust. She turned slowly to face Sharma, her clear blue eyes holding a profound depth that seemed to encompass the entire sweeping landscape. "You learn to see with more than your eyes, Lieutenant," Callista replied, her voice soft, yet imbued with a profound, almost ancient meaning. "You learn to see the very air itself, to perceive the invisible currents and eddies that bend and distort. You learn to discern the subtle heat rising from the ground, the imperceptible shimmer that carries information about atmospheric pressure and density. You learn to feel the Earth's majestic rotation beneath you, the precise, infinitesimal moment its Coriolis effect begins to subtly influence the bullet's long journey. You learn to listen, not just to the audible howl of the wind, but to its texture, its whispers, its very song as it moves across the land. You learn to see the target not merely as a fixed, inanimate point, but as a living entity within a larger living system, a dynamic interplay of forces. And most importantly, Lieutenant, you learn to see the purpose of the shot, to understand its ultimate consequence, its moral weight, its strategic necessity, long before your finger even contemplates touching the trigger. That profound purpose, that unwavering clarity of intent, is what truly clarifies the vision, what cuts through all the noise, all the uncertainty, all the impossible variables, and makes the impossible utterly clear, utterly achievable. Sharma pondered her words, a flicker of profound understanding dawning in her intelligent eyes. It wasn't just about optics or ballistic calculations, it was about a holistic, almost spiritual perception, a profound merging of heightened senses, unparalleled intellect, and an unwavering mental discipline, all driven by an unyielding clarity of objective. Callista was teaching them to transcend conventional marksmanship, to become true masters of their craft, not just skilled technicians, but artists of precision, philosophers of force. Life at Fort Carson settled into this new, rigorous rhythm. Callista continued to train her students relentlessly, pushing them beyond their perceived limits, subtly molding them into operators who understood precision beyond its mechanical, quantifiable definition. She remained a quiet, almost reclusive presence, her moments of profound, illuminating insight interspersed with long periods of silent, intense observation. Dalton was always by her side, learning voraciously, assisting diligently, and, most importantly, watching, absorbing, internalizing. He was becoming an extension of her will, a key component in her evolving methodology. The quiet, relentless hunt for the Ghost Ridge traitor, the silent viper burrowed deep within the ranks, continued ceaselessly beneath the surface of their demanding daily routines. Holloway's dedicated team, working tirelessly with the mountain of fragmented intel gleaned from Vronsky's captured network, had hit numerous dead ends. The traitor's digital footprint was meticulously erased, their physical movements untraceable, their connections masked by layers of proxies and shell companies. The pervasive silence from that front was unsettling, a constant gnawing reminder that the threat still lurked, unseen, unpunished, a shadow cast over the very integrity of their command structure. Then, one quiet afternoon, as Callista reviewed complex range data with Dalton in the sparsely furnished, empty program office, an anonymous, highly encrypted message materialized on a secure terminal designated solely for their program updates. It bypassed all standard military channels, a ghost in the machine slipping through the digital defenses like smoke. It was brief, chillingly cryptic, and utterly precise. The architect has been reassigned. Fort Carson, Unit 7. Watch for shadows. Callista read the message, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. The architect, the code name, resonated with a cold, unsettling familiarity. It was an old designation, whispered in the grim aftermath of Ghost Ridge, referring to the presumed mastermind behind the ambush. And the devastating intelligence leak, the one who planned the betrayal from within, pulling strings from the safety of the shadows. And now the architect was at Fort Carson, her base, her home, the sanctuary she had unwittingly chosen. Dalton, reading over her shoulder, felt a sudden profound dread settle in his stomach, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The architect? Here? But how? Who could it be? His mind raced, frantically trying to connect the dots, to identify anyone new, any suspicious patterns in recent assignments. The implications were staggering, almost inconceivable. The very person who had betrayed her original team, who was responsible for the deaths of her brothers-in-arms, was now within their perimeter, perhaps even observing their program, a wolf among the sheep. Callista didn't reply immediately. She simply stared at the screen, her expression unreadable, a perfect mask of control, but an almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes. A subtle clenching of her jaw betrayed the furious storm brewing within. The long, patient hunt, the silent dedication to purpose, the years of unaddressed trauma were about to converge into their most dangerous, most personal phase. The traitor, the phantom from her past, the architect of her pain, had, by an unfathomable twist of fate, walked directly into her lair. She slowly closed the terminal, the screen going dark, plunging the office into a heavier, more expectant silence. She rose and walked deliberately to a large, detailed wall map of Fort Carson, her finger tracing the intricate outline of the base, then pausing. With pinpoint accuracy over Unit 7, the general area housing various command and support staff, a seemingly innocuous section of the sprawling post. "We continue training," Callista finally said, her voice steady, devoid of any discernible fear, only an intensified cold resolve that sent a shiver down Dalton's spine. "And we watch every face, every shadow, every anomaly, every flicker of deceit." Dalton nodded, understanding the gravity of her words, the true depth of the new mission. The rigorous drills would continue, the relentless pursuit of precision unwavering. But now, every session would be infused with a different kind of urgency, a heightened sense of vigilance. Every interaction, every new face encountered on base would be scrutinized, analyzed, measured against an invisible rubric of suspicion. The training range, once a place for perfecting skills, was now simultaneously a scouting ground, a silent vigil, and a battleground in waiting. "You said you learned to see with more than your eyes, Major," Dalton murmured, echoing her earlier, almost philosophical lesson to Lieutenant Sharma, his voice barely a whisper, reflecting the profound weight of her words. Callista turned, her gaze fixed on the distant, bustling areas of the base visible through the office window, the ordinary hum of military life now imbued with sinister potential. Her eyes, usually focused on extreme distances, on targets beyond the horizon, were now trained on something far closer, far more insidious, a threat lurking in the mundane. "Yes, Sergeant," she replied, her voice a low, almost predatory whisper, barely audible above the faint hum of the building. "And now we learn to see with more than just light and shadow. We learn to see the subtle, insidious currents of deceit, the hidden agendas masquerading as routine, the ghosts among us waiting to be unmasked." She was preparing for another impossible shot, but this time she wasn't aiming at a distant steel target on a firing range or a critical transformer in a remote, fortified compound. This time she wasn't aiming to destroy, but to reveal. She was watching for ghosts, not in the desolate, wind-swept mountains, but within the very familiar, seemingly safe walls of their sanctuary. The ultimate act of precision would not be achieved with a bullet, but with the patient, methodical unmasking of a long-held secret, bringing an elusive traitor, the architect of her deepest pain, into the unforgiving, blinding light of justice. The game had not merely begun, it had finally, irrevocably come home, and Ghost 9 was ready. The story of Major Callista Rhodes, Ghost 9, is one that defies conventional understanding. From the quiet solitude of an armory, dismissed by the very elite she served, to unleashing an impossible shot that shattered expectations and reshaped the landscape of covert operations, her journey is a testament to hidden power, unwavering purpose, and a precision that borders on the supernatural. We've journeyed with her through the echoes of a devastating past, witnessing the silent torment of betrayal and the calculated pursuit of a justice that transcends mere vengeance. We've seen her ascend the unforgiving peaks of the Pamir Mountains, not for a kill, but for a strategic strike that dismantled a global criminal empire. And now, the hunt for the architect of her pain, the phantom traitor, has brought her back to the very place where her legend was reluctantly forged, where the shadows of betrayal gather once more. Callista Rhodes reminds us that true strength often lies in quiet observation, in the mastery of oneself, and in the profound understanding that every action, every precise movement must be driven by a clear and righteous purpose. She teaches us that sometimes the most impactful shot isn't the one that takes a life, but the one that illuminates the truth, that exposes the hidden and brings down the unseen architects of chaos. Her commitment to a mission, to a higher calling, despite immense personal cost, sets a new standard for what it means to be an operator, a soldier, and a guardian of justice. The game is far from over. The architect walks among them, a ghost in the familiar halls of Fort Carson, waiting to be unmasked by the very woman he once sought to destroy. The precision she once used to hit a distant target will now be turned inward to unravel a conspiracy woven years ago. The story of Ghost 9 is not just about a legendary sniper. It's about the silent battles fought within, the pursuit of truth, and the unwavering will to bring light into the deepest shadows. We hope you've been as captivated by Major Callista Rhodes' journey as we have. Her story is a powerful reminder of the extraordinary individuals who operate beyond the headlines, whose quiet dedication safeguards our world. What are your thoughts on Callista's choices? What do you think the architect's next move will be? We'd love to hear your theories and insights in the comments section below. Your engagement fuels our passion for these stories. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Ghost 9, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with fellow enthusiasts, and most importantly, subscribing to Veteran Biker for more unique narratives, untold histories, and compelling insights from the hidden corners of the military world. Don't forget to check out our other videos appearing on your screen right now for more incredible stories. Thank you for watching, and stay vigilant.